the corresponding images you need to have in mind. Let me open a copy of it. This is the discussion we had on the points of the ellipsoid. This one. So if you look at this figure, in the case of oblate case and the prolate case, you have the sequences, the figure axis, angular momentum, and the angular velocity. All three are in the same plane. We also showed that. And for the prolate case, we have the figure axis, angular velocity, and the angular momentum. So where is the angular velocity? Angular velocity is the intersection of the pole cone and the trace cone. They are butting each other from outside. In the case of the oblate ellipsoid, we have the trace cone sitting inside the pole cone. So pole cone is something on top of the ellipsoid, which is with respect to the moving frame of reference, and trace cone is with respect to the plane, that is the traces on the plane which is orthogonal to the angular momentum vector. Because of conservation of angular momentum vector, the direction in the inertial space is constant. Therefore, this plane is also constant in the inertial plane. So trace cone is associated with the angular momentum vector and pole cone is associated with the ellipsoid under consideration. Ellipsoid is basically the kinetic energy, pure kinetic energy of the rotating object, which is omega transpose theta omega. In the body fixed coordinate system, you notice that the theta is constant. So with that, we move on to the next step. So this sequence also we indicated earlier for each of these. This is what we were discussing. So the figure axis is the E3 axis. You have to imagine the object under rotation is kept there, but the angular velocity, you can see it is tilted, this omega, you can see. So the angular velocity vector is tilted away from the symmetry axis. Even though you give a spin in that direction, what actually happens is it is slightly shifted away because you have this additional rotation called the precession and the nutation which comes into picture. So let us now look at some examples. So we will take the nutation of the earth. In this particular case, when we say nutation, we are trying to understand how the omega is trying to move around the E3 axis. Omega is trying to move around the E3 axis. And then we will also discuss the precession case, how the L vector is trying to move or the omega is trying to move around the L vector. So both these cases we will consider. So let us take the example of the earth and understand if a nutation is happening for the earth, it is going to occur because it is having this oblate shape. So earth is not spherical but flattened rotation ellipsoid. So the half axis are actually 6378 kilometer along the equatorial directions and 6357 in the polar direction. There is a small difference. It's not very large, but this gives rise to some nutation frequency. The angular momentum axis and figure axis will not coincide. The figure axis will perform some kind of nutations about the angular momentum axis. Okay, sorry, I told the other word because these terminologies are reverse used in a different way. So what we are talking about now is we are looking at this figure axis and how this figure axis and the angular momentum vector are rotating about each other. So the figure axis performs nutations about the angular momentum axis. So we are trying to compute what is this angular velocity, what is the rate at which this nutation occurs. So you have to imagine you have an angular momentum vector fixed in the inertial space and how the figure axis is going to move around the angular momentum vector. So this is your notation. There is one more concept precision where we will discuss in the next example. So these terminologies will be confusing. You have to go back and then just think about it. So the angular velocity of the nutation, if you looked at that equation, what we had already derived, let me go back to what we derived earlier, that expression. When we found out the solution of the differential equation, this. So let us write down the L vector, then we get an idea. Yes, so this one. So you can notice that the L is represented as theta 1b sin kt e1 minus theta 1b cos kt e2 plus theta 3 omega 3 e3. So we are trying to compute what is this k. The expression for the k is this. The expression for the k is this particular expression, that is dependent on this theta 1. We will see it has some frequency. So this is the frequency at which let us look at this angular momentum vector L. L is your angular momentum vector. The angular momentum vector is moving around the figure axis. This is E3. So L is moving around the figure axis E3 because E3 is constant for the symmetric case. We had already noticed it in a specific example. So in that specific case, we are trying to find out how L is moving around this E3 axis. That is given by the frequency K. So let us look at the corresponding image for that. I think the image is before this. Okay. It is very similar to this one. Instead of omega, you have to assume this is L because both L and omega are moving around at the same rate with respect to the figure axis. So let us find out what is this thing. So k equals to theta 3 minus theta 1 divided by theta 1. So we have to compute these moments of inertia for the oblate earth. So the third axis is the principal axis. So you can go back and find out there are formulas for ellipsoid. Theta 1 equals to theta 2, which is along the equatorial direction. Equatorial plane, there are two axes, two principal axes. With respect to that, we get the moment of inertia as mass divided by phi, b square plus c square. And then for theta 3, you get a square plus b square. A, B, C are your three different lengths. Okay, so I think A and B, what are A and B? We had defined here. Okay, A and B are equal along, okay, so it is the other way around. A and B are equal along the equator and C is along the polar direction. So let us compute this nutational frequency now. So if you substitute this in this theta 3 minus theta 1 divided by theta 1 omega 3, we get this expression a square minus c square, b square plus c square omega 3. So we have to actually substitute these numbers and compute it, or we could do some approximations to get an easier expression. In fact, since you already know these diameters, you can substitute them also and then compute. So you have a plus c multiplied by a minus c divided by b square plus c square, and a and b are equal, and then the difference between the half axis is very small. So you could, in principle, assume a equals to c only for the addition operation. Don't assume it for the subtraction operation, otherwise everything will become 0. So this is actually a very small number. So if you do all this approximation, you get a minus c divided by a in the omega multiplied by omega 3. Omega 3, we know that it is the Earth's spinning rate is 2 pi radians per day. Omega 3 is your angular rate with which you have rotated along the figure axis. So if you substitute all these numbers, you get this number called 304 days. So that the figure axis is actually making a small wobble around the angular momentum vector with this period. People have made observation also. This figure axis is the geometric north pole along the geometric north pole direction, and the rotation axis is your kinematic north pole. They rotate about each other. So this experimentally measured period is around 433 days. What we see is, see this k is same even for omega as well as angular momentum L. So this is experimentally measured period, which is around 433 days. So of course, because Earth is not a very perfect rigid body, we get this variation. Computed value is 304. We will show some videos to see what this nutation is, then it will make a sense. This difference is due to the fact that Earth is not rigid. This amplitude is actually extremely small. It is just plus or minus 0.2 inch. So I think this is the angle made by figure axis and omega. That means we have to let us go back to that figure. I think I have made some mistakes in these two slides. So I'll have to go and check. This definition of nutation and precession. One is between the angular velocity and the figure axis, another is between the angular velocity and the angular momentum. So one of them is nutation, one of them is precession. So right now, both we have computed the omega 3 axis is making this revolution with respect to the angular velocity vector. I think earlier I mentioned it that way. In fact, both these things are same. Okay, let us see where is that. Probably this. Rotation of figure axis with respect to angular momentum. This terminology, there are dual terminologies. Some people use nutation, some people use precession. I think what we are seeing here is this particular thing. That is with respect to figure axis, how the omega is revolving around. This is the part we are looking at now. Whatever we discussed here, this 433 days or 304 days is the omega axis revolution around the figure axis. The L axis is also revolving. Okay, so let us probably see some videos, then you will get it. Just let me check it out. So let me share something on the chat box. One of you can open it. The YouTube. Kshitij, can you open it, or do you want me to share it with one more person? Yeah, the link is in the
gyroscope. I'm going to do a demo on calling gyroscopes. I'm going to talk about the rotation of the gyroscope, the precession of a gyroscope, and the nutation of a gyroscope. So this is an important concept in physics and also applies very importantly to astronomy and rotation of the Earth, precession of the Earth, and the nutation of the Earth. So when we have a gyroscope, we can spin it, give it rotation. So you can see here, this one is the rotational frequency. The faster I spin it, I increase the rotational frequency, right? Now, besides gyroscope rotating, it's also going to experience what we call precession. You see how it's going this way? It's precessing. That's called the precessional frequency, right? So this equation tells us the precessional frequency depends on the mass that I put here, the m, right, times gravity, times r. The r is the distance between the mass and the axis of rotation. In other words, this mass is causing a torque on the system, and because it's causing a torque, the torque is equal to its mass times gravity times its distance from the pivot point, right? So that's going to be the torque due to that mass. The further out, the heavier that mass is, and the further out I put this, the further out I put the mass, that's going to increase the precessional frequency. It's going to precess faster, right? And then I divide that by the moment of inertia of the shape, the moment of inertia of this object, which depends on its mass and its radius. That's the moment of inertia. And this is the rotational frequency. So if I give it a very small spin, if the rotational frequency is small, that will tend to make the precession faster, right? So let's see if the behavior of this is correct based on the equation. So the way it works is that you have to kind of start out with the horizontal, right, in the horizontal setting, and then spin it, and then let this apply a torque on the system, right? So I'm going to spin it slowly. So this is the rotational frequency I'm giving it, right? Spin it, and it's going to fall. And you see how precessing is very fast? So the precession is fast right here. Okay, so if this is slow, with rotational frequency, the precession frequency is going to be high, right? So now what if I spin it quick? If I spin it quick, let me do it faster, harder, then let it drop. Okay, it's precessing, but not as fast, right? It's moving around, but not as fast. So if this is high, then the precessional frequency is low, okay? So let's do that again. Slow, drop, going around. And then in a laboratory setting, we would measure the time that it's taking to go around. And then if you do fast, it should precess slower, right? The other things I can change in this is I can change the R, right? I can change the R. I can bring this weight in a little bit closer.
You can stop it now.
If I decrease the R, I'm decreasing the amount of torque. If I decrease the R, I'm decreasing the it should go down. That means it shouldn't precess as fast, right? So I brought this in a little bit. Let's go slow. Okay, the precession is not as fast as before. You see? So I did slow. Now what if I do fast? Rotate it fast. Okay, now it's doing something else that's kind of noticeable now. Not only is it precessing, but it's bobbing up and down. That's called nutation, right? Nutation. So the nutation frequency depends on the rotation frequency, right? So if I spin it fast, what's going to happen? Its nutation frequency is more noticeable. It's faster, right? So look at that. You see, that's called nutation. It's going up and down, and it's precessing. You see? So when I did it slowly, when the rotational frequency was slow, it kind of dropped down, and the nutation is not that noticeable.
Sir, your voice was not audible with this. Sorry, sir.
Sir, you are muted, sir.
Yeah, you can stop it now. So basically, I wanted to tell you two things. One is that nodding motion, which is called as the nutation, and then there is another moving around of the axis around this pivot point. So that is your precession. So precession is usually slower, and then the nutation is usually faster. That nodding operation. So what we have seen is that here. So, however, there are other cases. It will depend on so many other factors. We will not go into that. So let me. You can stop sharing now. Typically, mutation is faster. That's all. It occurs very frequently than the precision operation. Are you seeing the screen?
No, sir.
No, sir.
I think something has happened. Once I stop sharing, it is not. There's some issue with my. Is it visible now?
No, sir.
No, sir.
I think that okay, if I have to use a single window. Is it visible now?
No, sir.
Sir, you can leave the meeting and join again. Rejoin the meeting, sir.
I can?
You can rejoin the meeting.
No. I'm not hearing you. Your voice is.
Sir, you can rejoin the meeting, he's saying.
It doesn't work. I have tried it many times. Once this issue comes, I have to reboot it today, like I did today. I think I have shared only one screen. Is it visible now?
No, sir, it's still the same.
Can you see the screen?
No, sir.
No, sir.
It's not helping. Maybe now.
No, sir.
Okay, I can't help it now. Doesn't work. I'm using your Microsoft Edge. Probably there is a bug in that. I think probably we should skip it today. Okay. Not helping.
Sir, your screen is visible now.
Visible?
Yes, sir, it was visible.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
I
thought-
think it is taking too much time. Means internet connection is slow.
Yes, sir.
oh.
The last minute it was visible.
Let's try again.
So now it is visible.
Yes,
Yes,
sir, it
sir.
is visible.
Visible? Oh,
Yes, sir.
very good. I think probably network problem, is it?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir, mostly.
Internet is slow, sir. I think.
Okay. I think Institute Net may have some issues. Okay, so this is what we are discussing. Let us also, so nutation is that faster thing, which is 433 days observed thing. And then precession is something, the slower motion around that. We will, later on, we will see more videos. So here, the kinematic north pole means omega is moving around the figure axis with a 10 kilometer radius with this amplitude of plus or minus 0.2 seconds, arc seconds. Okay, this is arc seconds, that is the angle. So with this angle, you get around 10 kilometer radius in the sense of Earth's rotation. We will take one more simple example to understand why mass balancing is very important. You imagine a situation, these two dark, there is a wheel which is mounted along the bearings. These bearings are indicated by these hashed portions. So the vertical long line omega is the direction in which you are forced to rotate the wheel. However, there is a imbalance in the wheel. So instead of being perfectly orthogonal to this axis of rotation, there is a mistake in the manufacturing, because of which the actual figure axis of the wheel, which is E3, makes an angle alpha. This is an exaggerated picture. This will be like 0.1 minutes of the arc or something. We can imagine that. Then let us understand what is the effect of it. If it is perfectly vertical, there won't be any additional forces on the bearing by the shaft because it is not having any load there. However, when there is a slight tilt in the way you have mounted, but you are forcing it to rotate in some other direction, which is your omega direction, then there are forces felt F1 and F2. We will be computing these forces. Let us assume that the center of this wheel is at a height of D and the same length is there from the top. It is mounted in the center. So the E3 axis is, this is a disk. You have to imagine, we have shown only a section of the figure. This is a disk now. And then the E3 axis is orthogonal to the flat disk, and then E1 and E2 are along the disk. In our case, what we are assuming is E1 axis with E3 axis and omega are in the same plane. So as the wheel rotates, when the E3 comes towards you, E1 will go away from you. So that is what is shown here. Let the radius of the disk be R. The question is, what is the force felt on the bearings, which are F1 and F2? Because of symmetry, it will be equal forces. I've just indicated it by F1 and F2. Is the problem statement clear? If you know the force, then using the friction coefficient, you can find out how the wear and tear is happening. If these forces are as low as possible, then the wear and tear is minimum. If the forces are large, because of larger misalignment, because you are not able to mount the disc perfectly perpendicular to the shaft, or there may be a manufacturing defect while you are making the object. Is the problem statement clear?
Yes, sir.
Question is find force F1 and F2. So we straight away write this Euler equation. We assume that E1, E2, and E3 are the principal axis. Of course, they are in this particular case because it is a symmetric disk. Theta 1, theta 2, theta 3. Then theta 1 equals to theta 2. E1 and E2 are along the disk, orthogonal to the E3 axis. And then the angular velocity is omega. So the equations are expressed like this as shown in the left hand side. So we have to find out the torques D1, D2 and D3, because of which once you know the torque, you can compute the force. So this is your torque. Let the body fixed coordinates be surface normal E3, and E1 and E2 are along the orthogonal to the so E1 and E2 are orthogonal and along the disk. And E1 lies in the same plane as N, omega and E3. They are all in the same plane. So along E3, the moment of inertia, E3 is your perpendicular to the disk, flat disk. The moment of inertia can be computed as 1/2 mr square. Along E1 and E2, after some simplification and computation, it turns out to be 1/4 mr square. You could also have used the flat disk. You have heard of that theorem, no? There is a result if you have a very thin plate theorem. If theta 1 and theta 2 are there along the plane, then the orthogonal one is simply sum of these two. You could have used it, but anyway, there are other mechanisms to compute also. So once you have all these moments of inertia, let us now see what is happening to the angular velocity. What is the angular velocity? If you have to compute with respect to the body fixed coordinates, let us go to that figure. In this figure. So from this figure, along the E3 direction, what is the component of omega?
Omega cos alpha.
Omega, modulus of omega cos alpha. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Component of omega along E3. What is component of omega along E1?
Omega sine.
Yes, modulus of omega sine of alpha. And along E2? Remember E1, E3 and omega are in same plane.
0.
Zero.
Excellent. So that is what we have written here. So we have decomposed the components of this omega along the E1, E2 and E3 axis. So that we can substitute in this expression now. So what we have is we are forcing the object to rotate at constant angular velocity. Therefore, omega dot is 0. So these first three components of all the three equations, omega 1 dot, omega 2 dot, omega 3 dot is 0. In addition to that, what do we have? Theta 1, omega 2 is 0. Since omega 2 is 0, you don't have this expression. So this also becomes 0, and similarly this quantity. Therefore, the torques D1 and D3 are 0. So where is the torque felt now? Along the D2. So D2 is the component of torque along which direction? E1 and E3 torques are 0. There are no torques along the E1 and E2. There is a torque along the E2 direction, and that is D2 given by this expression. So are you able to imagine? E2 is orthogonal to it, and then there is always a torque on that. That means it is always pushing the bearing. So you have to imagine, this is not the flat thing. It is actually a circular bearing. I have only shown the section. So wherever that E2 is, it is always trying to push the bearing. Are you able to imagine that? And then that is with respect to, that the quantity of the torque is D2. So because of this misalignment, you can see, and the higher the angular velocity, the larger this torque is. And then it is also dependent on alpha angle. So you can simplify that as sine 2 alpha and everything. So corresponding to that, we can compute the couple forces, because there are two places which is acting now. That is, in one side, it is, suppose if you imagine there is a torque on the E2 axis, then you will notice that it will give rise to a couple on the two bearings, one at the top, one at the bottom. In one side, it is pushing in one direction. In the bottom, you will notice that the force is in one direction. In the top, the force is in other direction. So this couple can be computed as this particular expression. Since we know the distance, the torque is along E2 axis. Because of the torque, you see the forces F1 and F2. Because the distances are same, this gives rise to a couple, and then the couple force is given by mr square modulus omega square sine 2 alpha 16d. You can check this out. Any questions here? Couple is D equals to R cross F. It is R into F now for our case. R is your D. Since there are two things, the torque is due to both of them, then you have to take the number as 2 into D. Any questions here? So this is the force on the bearing. So if you know the coefficient, you can see it is dependent on sine alpha also. The larger the distance, smaller the force. And then the larger the angle, the larger the force. These are the two key observations, and also larger the angular velocity. So this is the one which causes wear and tear in the bearing. If it is perfectly vertical, or if the bearing plane is orthogonal to, or it is parallel to the axis of rotation, so no force will be felt on. Okay, I think I should stop here. We will go to the next example in the next class. I think you have a next class coming up also. Any questions? This precession notation, you go to the YouTubes and watch various videos. It's a confusing concept because both are caused due to this rotation of the object. One is that smaller variation, what we studied. There is one more precession, which is larger variation. We will look at it in the case of Earth shortly as one of the examples.
Sir, can you share the slides?
Okay, I will do that.
Sir, also, sir, can you update the deadline, sir? I have mailed you, sir.
Kshitij, you have mailed me, right? I will update.
Yes.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, I've also mailed you regarding assignment 14, sir. There seems to be some mistake in the question that you have asked. There is no question on the slide you mentioned, sir. Could you also change that?
I have not changed. I will do it today.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, then. Have a good day, everyone.